If you've watched my previous videos on Three Houses development and remember what was discussed, you should have a pretty solid account of what the development process was like, what changed between trailers, and what content was cut. Because there was so much extra content that didn't see the light of day. This video is going to indulge in fantasy, the dream of a Three Houses director's cut, a definitive edition of Three Houses. What would be included in this new version of the game? But what is a director's cut / definitive edition? These updated versions of games or movies or other media are meant to be a more complete version of the original piece of media. If the developers were time constrained or didn't have the resources or knowledge at the time of the game's release, these later editions would basically serve as hardware patches. They give titles another shot at the spotlight, and generally with these, you hope that the experience is going to be better than the original game. Sometimes these definitive editions arrive on next-gen hardware for improved gameplay, frame rate, and graphics, like how Shadow of the Colossus has like 200 remasters in definitive editions. As a disclaimer, this is my wish fulfillment, and I'm going to keep it reasonable within the limits of Three Houses. It would be really stupid to be like, I wish Three Houses Definitive Edition would have a brand new route, or a golden route, or they should introduce a brand new character that no one's seen before, or something like that. I want to keep it realistic in this dream scenario, and I also want to offer suggestions that have a precedent based on the other games in the series. These are going to be from varying degrees of easy to implement to this is getting into wish fulfillment territory. But hey, this is a video for fun, it's not meant to be serious, I just want to talk about Three Houses again, I guess. Quality of life / performance. In my opinion, Fire Emblem Three Houses is one of the slowest games in the series. Most notably, it has genuinely terribly slow load times. And if you recall from the glitches video, you can actually cut down on wait time by starting a New Game Plus file based off the save from when you're just about to select an S support partner, as the loading screens after that just show the crest of flames glowing instead of the normal running byleth sprite. This exploit is painful for me to think about. I don't know much about game development and what Koei Tecmo does to make load times different, but it at least tells me that they could take some sort of effort into improving these load times. This is a game that asks for multiple playthroughs, and having spent legitimately over 900 hours on this game, I'm frankly getting pretty annoyed at seeing its prevalence. There are lag and performance issues like frame drops when the maps get busy, which seems like it shouldn't be the case given that map textures aren't that detailed to begin with. Resolving frame drops in maps would be utterly fantastic. Koei Tecmo moving backwards on FPS and performance versus its last 3D game over like 10 years prior is, to be honest, pretty embarrassing. Bug fixes. With definitive editions comes the chance to clean up on bugs. It's really easy to say, just fix everything, which, I mean, yeah, you probably should. But if I'm Koei Tecmo and I'm bug fixing what was discovered, I would prioritize the annoying and game-breaking bugs first. The Monday mission skip bug and the weapon accessory bug are two that come to mind. I'd fix up the visual mishaps with the fallen star status as well. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, check out my glitch video. As far as useful bugs are concerned, while these are all clearly unintentional and also useful, I'd still clean them up because honestly some of these oversights are just silly. The infinite dancer bug, infinite month, infinite money and renown, and the hilarious Hegemon throne bug should all be fixed. Silence not functioning properly is also silly and should be fixed as well. Being able to exploit the game into getting infinites of everything is game breaking, and of course, while it would be beneficial to the player, these are exploits and avenues not intended by the developer. And once you know about these exploits and how easy they are to perform, it's kind of hard not to use them. No Fire Emblem game has had bugs like this, and in my opinion they're better off not being there. Minor oversights like the Ashen Wolves' Japanese-only death screams and Odessa's death quote seem like easy fixes too. The other bugs mentioned in my previous video all seem so hard to replicate and rare to occur that even I wouldn't bother fixing them up. User interface. This section is a bit wish fulfillment, mainly because it doesn't seem likely that Koei Tecmo would ever significantly change the UI in a new edition. But on the topic of quality of life changes, there are some things I would include to make the user experience, sifting through menus and so forth, be more intuitive. The quote-unquote radial menu on the prep screen looks pretty until you realize that it's not really a radial menu at all. It's a circular version of an itemized list, and weirdly all of the important preparation options aren't even in the main circle. You need to move left and right to get anywhere, which doesn't serve a circular menu's purpose. There are some other stuff like how you can't actually view the amount of professor level points needed to level up until you're literally in a battle, and that gets annoying for me. For example, I can't tell how many fights I need to engage in to perfect a class, even though the gauge is right there. It'd be nice to actually see how much progress there is left on a weapon stat, or a professor level, or a class mastery. I also think there are some accessibility issues that the game could stand to resolve. The text is notoriously tiny, and there should be an option to make them bigger. Consumable stat boosters being unable to be used in the prep screen is pretty dumb, and there's a precedent for this to occur in literally any other Fire Emblem game, so just add that. Story and characters. Oh boy. Well, first of all, this is a no-brainer, but the Cindered Shadows and all previous DLC must be included in the Definitive Edition, as is usually the case for Definitive Editions in games. Story amendments and additions can be pretty wishful, but I'll try to keep these requests reasonable. There's a precedent for NPC and enemy characters to be recruited in post-game content through challenge maps, like FE6's challenge maps or FE8's creature campaign. That would work well as New Game Plus content, given that Sothis, Rhea, and Geralt are mostly already prepared with unique voice lines, and every other character in the game has battle dialogue for literally everything. See the cutting room floor video for more details on this. This would be a welcome addition that the series is already familiar with. Crimson Flower. In what is one of my most unrealistic expectations, based on the very slight evidence that there was a planned Shambhala chapter in Crimson Flower, this chapter ought to be included. As previously mentioned in both the Edelgard support science and the cutting room floor videos, there are deployment slots for Dimitri and Edelgard in the same location as Claude. As we know, Stand Strong at Shambhala is only in Verdant Wind and Silver Snow. What these deployment slots may, and big emphasis on may, suggest is that at some point, Azure Moon and Crimson Flower could have had this chapter included in their routes. This is not to say definitively that this was planned, but it is a hint and a theory, at best. Crimson Flower could use the extra chapters, and like I suggested in my Edelgard support science, could greatly benefit Edelgard's characterization, as it could force her to have her deception regarding the Aryan road attack confronted. For new characters in Crimson Flower, why is Hilda unrecruitable in this route? Given that Hilda is meant to serve as the close partner to Claude in a similar way that Dedue is Dimitri's retainer and Hubert is Edelgard's right-hand man, Hilda was meant to serve a similar role, it seems. But the background and history between Claude and Hilda is actually non-existent. Where Dedue and Hubert know their respective lords from childhood, Hilda does not know who Claude is at the beginning of the game. Honestly, recruiting Hilda in the game is just strange in general. You can recruit her no problem in Azure Moon, but you can only recruit her in Black Eagles between chapter 12 and 13 if you're on Silver Snow. Hilda doesn't have exclusivity to Golden Deer, it's just Crimson Flower where you're not allowed to use her for whatever reason. I would make her just recruitable. Silver Snow. I have trouble coming up with a wish list for Silver Snow because this route was the first one ever conceived. Silver Snow was the original route that the writers wanted to roll with, and it was Crimson Flower that branched off from that. Nothing really strikes me story-wise as an immediate must-have fix for this mode. It doesn't have a unique character, and in fact you lose Hubert and Edelgard. While one could argue that Silver Snow needed a unique character, I hesitate to agree with this since Kusekihara made their defection not only have a narrative impact, but was made to make Silver Snow the hardest route in the game. Adding a unique character in the mix despite this doesn't really feel like the right thing to do in my opinion. Azure Moon. Honestly, Azure Moon feels pretty complete to me already. It's a very simple story relative to like the franchise, and Dimitri's story is done pretty solidly because of it. I've heard people talk about a planned route split, as in the choice between going to the Kingdom or Enbar, but that is just a rumor. There is absolutely nothing in game files to suggest this was a scrapped route split, and at most, it was just another one of the pointless dialogue choices in the game. I think it would be pretty cool for the Rodrigue and Fleisch scene to have been animated. Happy's S-support ending was the game's retroactive way to resolve Dimitri's Those Who Slither in the Dark investigation, which is, in my opinion, pretty silly that they decided to solve that as an ending. In DLC, perhaps they can make a secret ending based off requirements to be had that allowed for Dimitri to satisfyingly resolve his investigation and learn the truth. It's pretty wishful Philly, but whatever. Verdant Wind. I'd say the biggest need for Verdant Wind that is within the realm of possibility is making Judith playable. It would mean that she needs to have supports and T-lines, but hey, Verdant Wind needs something unique in the character department. Azure Moon has Gilbert, Crimson Flower has Euretha through DLC, we've been through this already. I always found the recycling of Verdant Wind's ending animated scene between Edelgard and Byleth to be very cheap because the narrative tension between these two characters is a whole lot less of a presence than Silver Snow. In Silver Snow, you fight alongside Edelgard for months before she betrays you. She's the one to meet you in the church in the time skip. In Verdant Wind, there's no change in the scene. Treating Edelgard the same way it happens in the church route within the context of Verdant Wind is pretty cheap and feels like a copy and paste. It would have been nice for this scene to play out differently, with Claude perhaps in the background giving his perspective, or something to say, or anything like that. But this change doesn't seem very realistic to happen. What I do think is something they should do is find somewhere to add the Khalid name drop, since the developers bafflingly said they couldn't find a good place to put it. It seems really silly that that's the excuse they went with. People want Verdant Wind to be less of a copy and paste of Silver Snow, and have Claude explore the more non-Fodlan related aspects of the game and explore his scheming mindset more, going as far as to suggest whole redos of Verdant Wind or other regions being included. But I think people undervalue Claude's characterization in Verdant Wind. I don't have many issues with the route itself, besides what I mentioned. People may ask for a golden route, in that it's a route that has all the lords work together and defeat a common enemy, like Revelation. I completely disagree with this, and also it would go directly against the developer's intent behind not having a golden route to begin with. A route like this was never in the cards, and quite frankly, I'm grateful for it. I also found the circumstances of the endgame bosses in Verdant Wind and Silver Snow to be weird, that Nemesis doesn't appear in Silver Snow despite Shambhala being destroyed anyway, and Rhea doesn't go crazy in Verdant Wind despite being exhausted and imprisoned like in Silver Snow. Maybe that could be addressed as well. Cindered Shadows. Make Geralt playable. Make him like a Goto or something in the end. Give him added lines to develop him in the face of fighting the big boss of this path. He is fighting his wife after all. That he isn't there is a travesty. Why Alois is a bigger presence than Geralt's non-existent one is among the utterly confusing choices that Intelligent Systems has done with Three Houses. Characters. Post-time skip designs for the church staff would be nice, although you would need to remake the confession CGs as well. But it always struck me as disappointing that they weren't treated like that. I was looking forward to the new designs in my first playthrough, but we got the exact same thing. Minus Cyril. I don't really see an issue in adding more male pairings for Byleth, as the only three that exist are Linhardt, Yuri, and Yuritsa, with Alois and Gilbert being understandably platonic. Compared to female Byleths Dorothea, Rhea, Mercedes, Edelgard, and Sothis, there's clearly a lack for the male side. Sexuality plays absolutely no role in characterization in this game, so I don't really find this would be much of a problem to add. While the DLC rounds out the same-sex options at 5 for each, 2 of the males, like I said, are platonic. Can Anna also have supports? She is a whole-ass character, and there's a precedent already to have her romanceable, like in Fates and Awakening. She's always felt like a completely random addition to this game, and her implementation was pretty terrible. She sucks and provides like no worth as a unit. So, just make her good, I guess. Classes and skills. I don't like how gender-locked classes are done in this game. I don't think making heroes, dark mages, grapplers, and brawlers is going to do anything to take away from the unit diversity in Three Houses. I've played this game for over 900 hours at this point, and some of these restrictions wouldn't really change the gameplay experience in a negative way. There's a precedent for Pegasus Knights to be female locked, and I really don't care about this restriction anyway, as Wyvern Lord is just the better and arguably best class in the game. But Hero and Dark Mages being locked is pretty silly, and female units basically have no reason to ever get into brawling classes, because outside of War Cleric, which is a pretty mediocre class, that proficiency in brawling won't help you past Warrior. I just want Fierce Iron Fist with Catherine. Is that too much to ask? I'm not advocating for the complete abolishment of gender-locked classes. Like I said, there are precedents to gender-locked classes in the series, so I don't really mind that much, but some of these just never made sense to me. I think if you wanted to add an extra class here and there, perhaps a lance equivalent to Swordmaster or Warrior would be neat, like Halberdier with Lance Crit plus 10 or something. I don't know. I do hesitate to add tier 3 classes like Marshals, True Blades, and so forth a la Radiant Dawns, mainly because some of the advanced classes are hella overpowered anyway. But there is a precedent for tier 4s and Echoes as DLC overclasses. Totally unnecessary, but fun, broken class additions. If you gave me the keys to entirely remake the class system, I would, but that is way beyond the scope of this video. Combat art animations are the same every time for every class, and it would be really interesting to see different animations for different arts. That'd be cool too. More effort in the animation department would always be nice. Monastery Stuff. People familiar with the cutting room floor video should know that this game had a lot of monastery features changed and cut out entirely. But first off, having a fast travel to actual character locations would be greatly appreciated. Finding characters on the fast travel map is already way more annoying than it needs to be and would cut down on monastery time in the long term. If I had to pick one cut monastery activity to restore, I'd pick horse raising or mounted training. The possibility of exploring otherwise completely unexplored regions of the map is very appealing to me. It would also give the stables an actual purpose and make the monastery a more complete experience. This seems quite easy to implement, but having class attire be viewable in the monastery and not just online liaison would be small and fun to see, especially in support and story dialogue. Visual differences in the church would be an incredibly welcome addition. You go through 2 years of story and the scenery doesn't change at all based on the season. A night and day and 4 season variations in the monastery, and maybe even some playable maps too, would be a nice, refreshing change that doesn't seem difficult to implement. This is a miscellaneous suggestion, but in the same way that you can view text, events, and supports in the event viewer, why aren't paralogs here? Just why not them? Put those in there too. To wrap things up, these ideas have all varying degrees of unrealistic wish fulfillment. Some ideas seem pretty easy and serve as necessary quality of life changes, while others lean towards not being very realistic. I tried to have my suggestions lean on changes that have series precedents already, as well as ideas that would make Roots feel more complete. The biggest challenge in this list is imagining Intelligent Systems and Koei Tecmo would go the extra mile with a definitive edition in the voice acting and new animations and artwork. But hey, this video is a massive what if anyway. If Three Houses were to actually get a definitive edition down the line, at least now I have a video about hopeful expectations in the video catalog.